Go, Verizon. Good. Tonight we're going to be expanding on thyroid. Okay, we did thyroid a couple of weeks ago, and like I said, it was too much information in too short of a time. That's why July is thyroid month. Okay. Because it is. It's too complicated of a subject, particularly when you talk about the entire endocrine system. Tonight we're going to be breaking it down into mental health, stress, and thyroid. So just really simple stuff. First off, physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Those are the only three types of stress that you can come up with. So accidents, you're frustrated with your boss, okay, you're frustrated with your spouse, or chemical stressors, okay, toxic food components. Your body responds the exact same way to all three stressors. So if you're on a consistent basis where you have a consistent horrible relationship, whether it's at work, home, friends, whatever, it's just like getting in a consistent rugby match every day. Okay? But your body responds to these stressors in an appropriate fashion. When we talk about the thyroid, you got to look at it as regulating all metabolic functions in the body. It doesn't regulate all of them, but it regulates most of them. So it's like the main system regulator. Now, what's interesting, and this is kind of a real rough overview, imagine if you had a healthy functioning metabolic processes in the body. Okay, this is what goes on with the thyroid. Thyroid basically produces two main molecules, okay, a T3 and a T4. T3 has 3 molecules of iodine, T4 has 4. I know, it's really not that complicated. But when these guys go in there and they regulate metabolic processes, they generally use glucose to do that transfer, to change T4, which is not that active, into T3, which is very, very active. It uses the glucose to have the metabolic processes. Now, the byproduct of a glucose metabolic process happens to be carbon dioxide and water. So it's almost like a very, very simple, effective metabolic processing. However, under stress, your body still has to have metabolic processes. Figure your body's going to build 1 billion cells a day. It has to. Whether you're in Auschwitz starving to death, it's going to take pieces of your body to build itself, or if you're living in Beverly Hills eating lobster every day, okay, you have to build those 1 billion cells a day. If you're under chronic stress, it's going to use cortisol to regulate the metabolic processes. If you're not under stress, it's going to use the thyroid, or if you have a healthy thyroid, it's going to use the thyroid to regulate the metabolic processes. Okay, so you're going to have those metabolic processes go on to be regulated in the body. Under stress, your body's going to use cortisol, which the byproduct is toxic to your system. Under normal physiology, your body's going to use the thyroid. Okay, does that make sense? It's kind of a real rough overview of the entire endocrine system. So now let's look at stress in relation to thyroid. Under stress, just like what you would think, you're being chased by a tiger or you're upset, what do you think has to happen to heart rate? Goes up. I know. Isn't this good visual aid? Okay, yeah. I have one sister that speaks sign language. Okay. So heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, blood sugar goes up. Why? Because you're under stress and your body needs to respond to that. You need to have that increased metabolic processes to protect yourself. And also too, when you're under stress, do you want blood supply going to the gut? No, you want blood supply going to arms and legs. So it means this is what's called a sympathetic dominant pattern or a fight or flight response. This is what happens normally under stress. Also, now you've got this area in the brain called the pituitary. It spits out a hormone called thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? And it's called TSH for short. Well, that tells the thyroid to produce the T3 and T4. Okay, so you got this pituitary always telling the thyroid to work when it's under normal physiologic responses. Okay, under stress, you've got this hormone called cortisol that interrupts that pathway. It slows down the pituitary's production of TSH. So think of this. Normal physiology, when you're not under stress, your thyroid regulates metabolic functions. When you're under stress, cortisol is secreted, a stress hormone. It shuts down the normal thyroid metabolic processes, so your body can go under cortisol, which it's damaging to the body long term, but in short term, you get a tremendous amount of energy and you're able to survive. But what would happen, and think of this, imagine if you were in a chronic state of stress. Would you be misdiagnosed with high blood pressure, with maybe high cholesterol, high blood sugar? Do we have a population that's like that? Absolutely. Now, Saturday, I'm at this little town in the desert, and normally we just drive through it really, really quickly, and I hardly ever stop there. I'm not a big fan of it. I've gone there a couple of times for seminars. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Las Vegas. Anyone ever heard of it? Okay. Well, this time I stopped there and I actually enjoyed it. Okay, we went and saw a show. And my brother-in-law's having a party at this beautiful, beautiful cabana, and I'm there talking. And at parties, I'm really, really shy because I don't know anything but health. So I'm up against the wall, and this gal finds out that I know a bit about anatomy and physiology. And I start talking to her, and it's driving me crazy because here she is. She's got a can of Diet Coke. She has a genetically modified corn chip. She's dipping it into this dip that I know has got monosodium glutamate in it, and she's doing this, and she's asking me questions about cancer. She just had a mastectomy. And I'm going, wow, didn't anybody ever tell you what caused it? And she says, oh yeah, it runs in my family. How can you make it a half a century and all of a sudden genes are activated? Didn't anyone talk to you about genetic expression, how genes don't change, but genetic expression you do have control over? Didn't the oncologist tell you anything about neurotoxins or normal physiology? No. I mean, what happened? So I sit down there and I talk to her, and I actually enjoyed the birthday party finally. So it turns out, Now, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this has everything to do with the thyroid. If you look at this, each organ system is dependent on the other system. So the thyroid is not an organ that needs to be looked at separately. In fact, that's beyond foolish. It's like thinking breast cancer is a problem in the breast. It's not. It's a problem with the immune system. You can't have a thyroid issue. So then I asked her, I said, well, let me get a little bit about your history. Are you taking any medications? Oh yeah, I've been on Synthroid forever. Okay, so that means, when did you start it? Okay, so this gal's like 55 right now. Okay, just had breast cancer. They started her on Synthroid, synthetic thyroid hormone, when she was 25. Now, first off, the things that are going to decrease thyroid function should be a red flag. We know that the thyroid produces mainly T3 and T4. Okay, we're just going to talk about those two. Okay, it uses a protein carrier called thyroid binding globulin that carries it to the cell. Estrogen can bind to that thyroid globulin, simulating a low-functioning thyroid. Okay, so what you're telling me, at 25, she might have been exposed to excess estrogens. Yes or yes? And thinking that she has an estrogen-based cancer, maybe this started a few years before, the doctors that were working on her detected it. But whatever the reason, she had a low-functioning thyroid. Could that low-functioning thyroid also have been a problem with the liver? Maybe there was excess fats, inappropriate sugars, inappropriate liver metabolism, because the liver is where 80% of that T4 is converted to T3. Or maybe she had a problem with the gastrointestinal tract, since 20% of the T4 is converted to the T3. Or maybe she had a problem with bile acid production, which actually breaks down some of the fats and helps produce cholesterol, which is where progesterone and a lot of the other hormones are produced. What do you think she had? I don't know. This is 25 years ago. What drives me crazy is that the doctors knew that she had a thyroid problem, and then they gave her synthetic thyroid. Here's the problem. They're not giving us synthetic thyroid. Has anyone in here ever heard of Synthroid? It's not a thyroid hormone. It's T4. Okay, now the thyroid produces T3 and T4. T4 is not really active. T3 is like 20 or 5 times more reactive. So when you're given thyroxine or Synthroid, the thyroid feels or senses that the production of the thyroid hormone's already up, so it shuts down production of T3. So by giving the hormone, you're already altering the function. Okay, so it's, you know, I mean, I'm okay with ignorance, okay, but this is just ridiculous. Then, 35, her gallbladder goes. Okay, so now what are the problems of the low thyroid that she had when she was 25? Excess estrogen exposure, possibly. Liver problem, possibly. Gastrointestinal problem, possibly. Okay. No matter what happened, we gave her a toxic synthetic hormone that's going to decrease thyroid function. All of those things are considered normal. Okay. Now she develops gallbladder issues. So what am I thinking? See, I'm not connecting the dots here. So it's got to be liver, gastrointestinal. Now she's got another liver problem. The gallbladder's not working right. So instead of saying, wow, you know, let's find out the liver problem, you know, you've been taking Synthroid for 10 years, now you got a gallbladder issue. Now the gallbladder stores and concentrates bile, so that means without the gallbladder, you can't absorb healthy fats and you can't produce, you know, a lot of hormones. So that means you're going to be at risk of, a greater risk of cancers, you're going to have a weakened immune system, and you're not going to have healthy fats. Without healthy fats, your brain doesn't function correctly. Okay? So they remove the gallbladder and they don't tell her anything about nutrition. So then 45 rolls around, she has fibroids and a hysterectomy. Anyone in here ever have relatives or friends that you see making incredibly poor life decisions? Raise your hands if you know somebody like that or knew someone like that. I've used this analogy a lot. It's like seeing somebody you love driving at 80 miles an hour into a block wall. Dude, you can brake, you can turn, you've got all of these options, okay? But they just keep going into the block wall until they, you know, date the drug addict with tattoos, okay? You know, and do you know what I mean? Okay, they do something really bad. 45-year-old fibroids. So now fibroids only occur in a body if you have excess toxic exposure, so I'm thinking more of the estrogens, you have decreased liver function, decreased pancreas function, and decreased adrenal function. So right now, I know the fibroids are there for a reason, but also more excess estrogens. So they remove the ovaries and uterus. They do what's called a hysterectomy. I have so many patients in here that have had hysterectomies, and I ask them a question, just one question, and universally I get this look like, why are you even asking that? So I get, you know, I say, oh, you had a hysterectomy? Okay, you're 55 years old. Why'd you have it? And it's almost like, well, heck, I wasn't using it anymore. No, there has to be a reason. You know, you've got these ovaries that are continually going to produce estrogens, progesterones. I mean, they have a function. So still, no doctor is looking at the normal physiology that the thyroid clued us in to the original problem. Okay, does that make sense? All the doctors are missing this. Then she develops breast cancer. Okay, and develops a mastectomy. So she's had multiple clues around her life to show that there's been problems with her metabolic responses. Okay, does that make sense? Now, what's that barbaric procedure where they flatten out the breast, okay, damaging tissue, and then they radiate it? The thing that takes 9 years to show a tumor, what's it called? Mammograms. Okay, good. What's the thing that's not recommended by most doctors anymore? That mammograms. Okay, yeah. Now, it takes 9 years to damage the breast. It takes 9 years for a mammogram to find the smallest tumor it can detect, which is about the size of a head of a pin. So that means that she had cancer for 9 years before they found it. Okay, and that's going on minimum. So they could have detected this years earlier. Years earlier, she could have been put on a healthy, nutritious diet. They could have told her about how metabolic responses, how the body works. So what I'm using is the canary in the coal mine. And so, I know this is a long explanation, but that was my brother-in-law's birthday party. So I know it was the first time I enjoyed Vegas. It was like, hey, I can contribute to this person's life. So when we look at it, the canaries used to be used because you can't smell poisonous gas, you can't do anything, but the miners would always look at the bird, and if it was flipping around, they thought, cool, we're still alive, we have breathable air. If the canary died, it's like, guys, let's get out of here. I know that's the worst job in the world to have, being the canary. So when you look at it, physical, chemical, emotional stress, if you have it chronic, your body is not going to be able to utilize the thyroid to its full potential. Your body is going to using cortisol to regulate the metabolic responses. Okay? So under stress, your body is not going to be utilizing the thyroid. Under stress, just stress alone is going to decrease thyroid function because cortisol decreases the brain's communication. Okay? So I'm trying to work it out really basic. So you got stress. That decreases the thyroid immediately. It also increases stress hormones. Now, with the thyroid decreased, okay, instantly, also digestion is going to decrease. If digestion decreases, that means serotonin production is going to be decreased. This means depression, anxiety, frontal lobe problems, because you got this gut, this enteric brain that's supposed to function correctly. And under stress, you're shutting blood supply down and nerve supply down. So what are some of the other things that if you shut blood supply and nerve supply down to the gut, what are they going to develop? Lack of serotonin production, so we're going to have depression and anxiety. Also, we're going to have acid production, which isn't, they're not going to have healthy digestion, so maybe have to have antacids, okay? Then since they're taking in nutrients and they can't process those nutrients, the body's going to store it, so you're going to have weight gain. Okay, you're going to have a slow metabolism. But that's okay because, remember, we're watching the body drive 80 miles an hour into a block wall, and what are we going to do? We're going to just ignore all those clues. So we're going to give an antacid, an antidepressant, maybe a high blood pressure, maybe cholesterol medication. Not looking at the physiology changes as smart. Okay, does that make sense? So the first thing that we can see physiologically is the person's tired. They don't have enough energy. Wow, okay. So if they're tired, they don't have enough energy. Are they sleeping okay at night? Do they have healthy nutrition? What's the clue? But in crazy world, we just go in there, check the brain, the TSH, and we check the thyroid function. It's low, we give you a drug. None of that makes sense. Now, cortisol production. This is the hormone produced under stress. Does anybody see bodies like this in our society today? All the time. And I got to tell you, every time I see somebody with bruises everywhere, there's only three things going on. They're either on aspirin therapy or blood thinners, or they've got excess cortisol. And if they got excess cortisol, cortisol's under stress, so does that mean their body's under chronic stress? Yes or yes? If their body's under chronic stress, okay, the hormone called cortisol is being secreted. What does cortisol do to brain function communicating to the thyroid? Does it increase thyroid function or decrease thyroid function? Decrease thyroid function. So, see? Okay, so I'm walking you through. I thought I'd give like a rough overview. I think it's going to work this time. Okay, so cortisol, if you see bruises everywhere, you see weight distribution like that, you know they have a low functioning thyroid because they have excess stress. Okay? Does that make sense so far? Okay, so when we look at this, let's also look at estrogens. Estrogens come from three different things. Okay, environmental toxins, the ovaries, adrenal, and fat cells. Fat actually becomes its own hormone-producing organ. It produces estrogen. So when you see somebody with this type of body style, they're not overweight. They have excess cortisol, excess stresses. They're adapting to an environment that has nutrition poor, calorie-rich food. Okay, so their body is under stress. So are these people here, are they producing more estrogen than they should? Yes or yes?
Yes.
If they're producing more estrogen than they should, are they going to have more estrogen-based tumors? Yes, they will. So if we had a population that's exposed to toxins like this, would we see a rampant proliferation of hormonal-based cancers? How about 50% of our population? Okay, you know, ovaries, uterus, breast, okay, all because of environmental stimulus. But now, would the body, before it got to this state, have given us clues that there may have been some type of toxic assault on the body? Yes or yes? Okay, yeah. So again, it's like you're watching your best friend drive into a block wall. You see this stuff and you go, oh my gosh, this is nuts. So estrogens and xenoestrogens. I have people come in here drinking out of things like this. Okay, now when this plastic bottle, I mean, God bless you, you know, I mean, water is a good thing. That's a good start. It's better than soda. But when they fill this, the plastic's still hot. Okay, and the water that goes in here is not regulated, okay, unless it crosses state lines. There's a great movie called Tapped. But if you fill this with water while it's still hot, you put the cap on it at the factory, then you let it sit in the truck, then it goes in there and it's refrigerated and somebody goes in there and grabs it and they drink it, okay, they're getting xenoestrogens. They're taking something that they thought was healthy into something that's toxic. Okay, so this is going to add to estrogens even though they think they're doing good. So also hormones and meats, foaming agents. These are things that soaps foam up with. When we also look at cosmetics, birth control pills, that's a winner. Okay, we're going to give you a hormone that's going to stop you from getting pregnant. Wait a second, do you know exactly how the hormone works? No. Well, hormones, don't those tend to negatively affect thyroid? Yes, they do, but here, that's okay, take it. Well, aren't there a rash of hormone-based cancers? Yes, there are, but it's okay, take it, you won't get pregnant. Okay, well, I don't want to take that. I'm going to use a spermicide. Okay, good. That also has estrogens in it. That's why. Okay, so when we look at it, what are clues to excess estrogens? Remember, we got the thyroid function. Yeah, my energy's low. Okay, good. That's a clue. But also, what about these other ones? Fibroids, endometriosis. Oh my gosh, excess estrogens. How many people have fibroids? How many people have endometriosis? We see it all the time. And I get excited. I said, fibroids, cool. That's a defect of the kidneys and pancreas or excess hormones. I know, we can solve that. No problem. I can fix the thyroids. And then you look at low thyroid, migraine, mood swings, increased rate of strokes. So now we got it. Now, the thyroid hormone, the synthroid, is not synthetic thyroid. It's T4. It actually slows down the function of the thyroid to produce the really active form of T3. Okay, it's not. I mean, they used to have a thing called ground-up pig thyroid. Wait, no, it was called armor thyroid. Armor. Yeah, because you wouldn't have bought it if it said ground-up pig thyroid. Thanks. I'm not good at marketing. Okay, so when you think of that, you know, that's got T3, but it slows down the production of it. No matter what happens, can you see that the thyroid doesn't function in a vacuum? That if you have low-functioning thyroid, it's not a thyroid problem. It's going to be either a production problem with cholesterol or the adrenals or cortisol or the brain or something else. It's not going to be a problem with the thyroid. Here's one of the main causes as well. The omega-6 to 3 ratio. It should be 1 to 1, 1 omega-3 to 1 omega-6. Vegetable oils, which is inundating in our culture. Has anyone ever taken a corn and squeezed it really hard and get the oil out? No. You can't do that. You got to add sulfur dioxide. You got to add all this chemical processes. You can't do it. Has anyone had a bag of sunflower seeds to get the oil out? You know what you got to do? You can't grind. You got to do a chemical process, and then you got to heat it up to over 500 degrees. So any oil that's liquid at room temperature is toxic. Okay, unless it's olive oil. And that, generally, it's better if it's cold pressed. So we have our culture now that has all these health food bars with canola oil, with safflower oil, with seed oils, with cottonseed oil, all of these toxic oils that have a massive increase in polyunsaturated fatty acids. I've got an article in here in your handout that talks a lot by a brilliant guy, Dr. Ray Peat, on polyunsaturated fatty acids. They shouldn't be in our food system. They actually clump blood vessels together. It's poisonous for us. But they're in almost every packaged product. I mean, if people were eating this stuff, okay, instead of burning it in my car like I do, if you were actually consuming this, we'd have a population with 50% cancer. Oh, wait, never mind. We do. Okay, and this is what happens to the polyunsaturated fatty acids. Blood vessels are supposed to be separate. They look like frisbees. They are biconcave discs. And they're like that so they have a huge surface area to hold a tremendous amount of oxygen. because blood actually has a function. Now, if the blood vessels, instead of being this twin biconcave disc floating around with all the oxygen, if you're exposed to polyunsaturated fats, they get sticky and they start to clump together. So you don't have the same surface area. So you can't carry the same amount of oxygen. If you can't, so then start thinking about what's the function of blood. It's got to carry oxygen, it's got to regulate pH, vital to the immune system, eliminate waste products, right? So if you start clumping those blood vessels together, it can't carry oxygen. So that means you get in a hypooxygen state. What kind of cells grow better in a low oxygen environment? Cancer! Yes. Wait, that would be bad. So that means that all those vegetable oils are toxic. Wow. That would be an insane society. I guess the FDA really is the Fraud and Deception Association. So also, too, those blood vessels, instead of being thin, they're thick and it's not collected. What do you think has to happen to pressure in order to keep that thick blood through? It has to increase. And since the blood isn't carrying as much oxygen, so do we have to get more cells to the tissue? So that would be high blood pressure. Yeah, good. So high blood pressure is not a defect. There's nothing broken on the body, but there is some adaptation. So does this mean that people who are diagnosed with high blood pressure really don't have high blood pressure? Maybe they have a low functioning thyroid, stress, or too much polyunsaturated fatty acids. So the blood pressure is really adapting to that. Is that why that we have a 100% success rate? 100% success rate in lowering people's blood pressure to normal in just about 2 to 3 weeks? No, you're supposed to say, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, no, because we get people off this garbage and make the body work correctly. Now you may say, well, I don't eat any polyunsaturated fatty acids. My kids just had chicken McNuggets, and that's chicken. No, it's actually 56% corn. Chicken nuggets are 56% corn. See, and this is not just corn, this is genetically modified corn. I mean, and these are all corn products, okay? Graham crackers. My gosh, they're messing with my s'mores. Okay? You know, when you're going camping, you got to make your own stuff now. And my son actually now has a recipe to make his own marshmallows because we do want the s'mores. Now, Russell Blaylock, neurosurgeon. Brain poison, okay? The taste that kills. We're talking about thyroid function. We know that the thyroid is intimately connected to the brain. The brain tells the thyroid to work. If you have something poisonous in the brain, does that mean the thyroid's not going to show up correctly? So again, the thyroid is like the canary in the mine. If you have chronic exposure of neurotoxins, neuro means nerve, toxin means poison. So if you have poisonous products in your diet, you're going to alter brain function. You alter brain function, the thyroid is going to show up as one of the clues. And that's why on your handout we actually have the neurotoxins that the Fraud and Deception Association, because I mean we're all smart. You know, if you see MSG, you're not going to buy it. But what if you saw hydrolyzed protein or natural flavors? These are ways that the industry has controlled the government in order to produce toxic food products. Now, also, when we look at it, depression, bipolar disorder, these are all effects of the monosodium glutamate. Depression and bipolar disorder. The population's never been like that. Alzheimer's is at epidemic proportion. So also high fructose corn syrup. This is the #1 source of calories in the world. Now, how many people in here have just put that corn through that little grinder and squeezed out all the corn syrup? No, you can't do it. In order to turn corn into a sugary syrup, you have to go through a massive chemical process. Now, let's do something even crazier. Let's take genetically modified corn, something that animals will die if they eat, okay, and give it to human beings after it's been processed into high fructose corn syrup. Doesn't that sound fun? No. Okay, that's my impersonation of Dr. Evil. But when you look at this, it is evil. I mean, human beings can't process this stuff. And in fact, high fructose corn syrup has a great shelf life, but it's toxic to the body. It causes more triglycerides to be produced because those are used for tissue repair. Also, when we look at this, well, high cholesterol, it's interesting. They think that it's a problem with cholesterol. It's not. When you look at cholesterol, it's the precursor to everything the adrenals make. So high cholesterol means that there's tissue damage or stress. That's it. That's it. It's not a problem of anything else. Now, T3 immediately increases the conversion of cholesterol to progesterone and bile acids. This means, so T3, remember the thyroid produces T3 and T4. They're converted in the liver. Once the T3 and T4 get into that liver and convert it, okay, then they're able to utilize the cholesterol. So they lower the cholesterol levels because they can break it in and allow it to function. Okay, because cholesterol has a function. Have you ever heard that high cholesterol causes heart attacks? I know, that's an urban legend. Okay, 75% of all people who have a heart attack have normal to low cholesterol. Have you ever heard that cholesterol clogs arteries? Yeah. Why doesn't it clog veins? When they're drawing it out, okay, are they drawn out of the arteries or drawn it out of the veins? Doctors? Veins. Okay, so it's high in the veins. Why isn't that clogging it? Ooh. Wow, we start asking critical questions like that. This stupid matrix, or this ignorant matrix of the medical system, doesn't make sense, does it? So it doesn't clog arteries. It doesn't do that. But remember, the polyunsaturated fatty acids clump the blood vessels together. That's what causes it. This stuff, the high fructose corn syrup, can inflame the endothelium, the part of the arteries. Okay, and then you get that clumped blood vessels. That starts clogging. Not clotting, because blood vessels don't clot. They clump. Okay, there's a big difference there. And healthy thyroid function will solve that. Then you get these crazy things where if you take a drug to lower cholesterol, remember, cholesterol is produced for a certain reason. If you take a chemical to lower it, instead of restoring healthy thyroid function, which will also lower cholesterol, what happens? Memory problems, elevated blood sugar, type 2 diabetes. I mean, to think that a human being is one of the few animal species on the planet that cannot regulate their own functions? Is that insulting to anybody? Say yes. Yes. It should be insulting. You guys are built by God. I mean, that's quality. Better than Ford. Okay, so this stuff, to regulate your body functions with a chemical, it's a violation of law. It really is. This gal here, you're talking 68-year-old. She comes in here with scoliosis, obviously stress, but also high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar. In my world, high blood pressure is adapting to toxic blood or stress. Okay, high blood pressure, it's toxic blood or stress. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm thinking low thyroid function, abnormal diet, nutrition, and everything else. Now, she had to use a stair chair where she had to go from the first floor up to the second. And I said, hon, keep it. That way your grandkids can play with it, but you won't need it. And sure enough, 90 days, she went down 14% in her scoliosis. Now, her orthopedic surgeon said, yes, it did reduce, but it's really going to get worse afterwards. And she's going, what do you mean? It got better. But you're telling me it's going to get worse? Why? Because in his mind, what does an orthopedic surgeon give for pain?
Surgery.
Drugs, surgery. Okay, but the drugs, that's probably the safest, right? Okay. Ibuprofen, Aleve, Advil, those things inhibit proteoglycan production. They destroy building blocks of cartilage. They destroy the joints. So that's why he's never seen scoliosis recover, because he destroys it. Then we have iodine. Remember, T3 has 3 molecules of what? Iodine. What does T4 have? 4 molecules of iodine. So iodine's important. So you got to have it in your diet. And in fact, iodine deficiency is linked to breast cancer. Do we now know the link to breast cancer? Yes, because if you don't have a healthy function in thyroid, your body can't regulate the metabolism the way it's supposed to, so it utilizes cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which weakens the immune system, which leads to hormonal-based cancers or environmental toxins. So, can you see the connection there? So now, 40 years ago, they used to use iodine to raise up the yeast. They used it in bread manufacturing. Well, however, they found something cheaper and faster. It's called bromine. Okay? Okay. It's similar to iodine. You know, it's like human beings are like 99% monkey. We're similar to apes. Okay? I know. Similar doesn't cut it. Iodine is from a family called halides. It's the same thing with chlorine, fluorine, bromine. And your thyroid, it's going to recognize this stuff and try and build thyroid molecules out of it. But it can't. It can't. So if your body it needs the iodine, but it doesn't have the iodine, it's going to grab anything similar. Does that make sense? So commercial produced breads, if they have bromine in it, are toxic. Absolutely toxic. Fluoride was used as an anti-thyroid treatment. So if you had a hyperactive thyroid, they would give you fluoride. What community in this planet has fluoridated water? Well, Russia doesn't, China doesn't, most countries in Europe don't. Do they have rampant tooth decay? Nope. What are you giggling at? I know, it's stupid. I got it. Mass medication of the population with something that destroys the thyroid function without control of the dosage. Then you think, well, I'm going to be careful. I'm not going to do the thyroid. Okay, I'm not going to do the fluoride. Wheaties, milk, and Coke, if you drink that, okay, just a regular serving of it, you're going to have 233% more fluoride than the recommended toxic dose, okay, a day. Also, you may be careful. So you're not going to do fluoride in the water you're going to drink. But what if you have Hansen soda or Snapple? Okay, you know, you start looking at these in the manufacturing process. They're using the water from our water system thinking that it's okay, but it's not. And again, this is linked to cancer. Fluoride causes more cancer than virtually any other chemical. Now, leaky gut, if we have anything inside of our gut, and this is where Hashimoto's disease comes from. Neurotoxins, so that means genetically modified food, the MSG, vaccines, antibiotics, all of those things will cause holes in the gut. This allows large proteins like gluten and caseins to get in the bloodstream. The big thing with gluten is it looks really similar to the thyroid molecules. So the body, if you get this foreign protein in an area it shouldn't be, the body is going to build antibodies towards that gluten. This is why the antibodies towards gluten also attack the thyroid. And since the thyroid's going to be under attack, it inflames, and itis is how they do it. The first doctor to discover this, his name was Hashimoto's. Hashimoto. This is where thyroiditis comes from. No, did anyone find that interesting? I know, I thought it was really interesting. So when you get somebody with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you got to heal the gut, you get them on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, you get the immune system working correctly, and they get better. Also, frontal lobe. This is in the impulse control area of the brain. So any neurotoxins, anything that's going to negatively affect the brain is going to negatively affect the brain's control of the body. And that's why mood swings, quick temper. So when I get a kid in here or an adult that has frustration, abnormal anxieties, depression, so are you going to think about abnormal frontal lobe function? Yes or yes? Yeah, I know, so am I. So I'm going to think about altered thyroid function. I'm going to think about altered gut function because that's where serotonin's produced. So instead of looking at symptoms, let's start looking at clues to how the body works. Now, if we treat depression with a drug, you have about 50% of the kids treated with a drug for depression end up with bipolar disorder. So you take from something that's really easy to solve to something that's absolutely hard. Does anybody know how depression or how the antidepressants work? No. I know, neither do they. They're supposed to slow down the uptake of serotonin, but they don't. Nobody knows how they work. They know they're linked to depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. But remember, if you approach the body with intelligence, that depression and anxiety means that person's under chronic stress, or they have lack of serotonin production from the gut, or there's some clue, there's some reason why. This fella, Abraham Hoffer, they would turn severe schizophrenics around along with depression and anxiety sufferers by just changing nutrition. They found out that if you change nutrition, you change the function of the body. If you change nutrition, can you heal the gut? Yes or yes? Yeah. If you heal the gut, can you also heal the liver? Yeah. If you heal the gut and the liver, can you also heal the brain and neurotransmitter function? Yes, absolutely. If you get somebody out of that fight or flight, that stress situation, are they going to start to go into normal physiologic responses with the normal thyroid function? Wow, this could be big. I mean, this could wipe out like the pharmaceutical industry. It could save America a lot of money, and we wouldn't have diseases. Trip. You know, it's almost like the doctor of the future will give no medications, but he'll instruct his patients on the care of the human frame and the cause and correction of disease. I know, I stole that from medicine. Okay, soy is toxic. Don't do any soy. Soy is poisonous. Soy is toxic. It blocks protein absorption, and it has a xenoestrogen effect where it increases estrogen. But this is used in infant formulas. We know that soy is linked to breast cancer and brain damage. Okay, why? Because it's also one of those polyunsaturated fats. It'll close stuff together. Progesterone is fantastic. This stuff balances it out. Now, you're not going to see a lot of progesterone pills. Why? Because the best sources are from food. Eggs, wild yam, shellfish, turmeric, walnuts, oregano, thyme. I mean, a lot of these spices that we should be using every day. So when you start looking at this, just healthy foods can increase progesterone. You're not going to see it because you can't patent it. The cheapest food sources have progesterone in it, and that balance out excess estrogens. When you're drinking from that plastic bottle of water, when you're exposed to the different estrogens in our system, you can balance it out by just taking progesterone and fixing the problem. Does that seem too easy? Because it is. It really is simple. This patient here, 29 years old, $1,000 a month she was spending on medications for depression and anxiety. Did she have a healthy functioning thyroid or poor functioning thyroid? Years before, when she was a teenager, they told her she had a bad thyroid. Years before. And nobody did anything about it. And sure enough, within 90 days, you know, no drugs. I think that was, 9 months later, you know, traumatically induced scoliosis, you know, better, sleeping better, drug-free. Isn't that neat? It's like respecting the body. You need to have healthy exercise in order to move the lymph. So if you have an abnormal thyroid, exercise is one of the ways to get it back healthy. You need fresh fruits and vegetables. The thyroid knows what to do with this stuff. Your digestive tract knows what to do with this stuff. It really makes sense. This is why, I mean, muscle meats in animals have tryptophan and cysteine in it, and it actually blocks thyroid function. So when we're telling people, you know, don't eat chicken, that's poisonous, don't eat muscle meats, it's toxic for your system, it is, because it's going to slow down thyroid function. And if we're trying to heal your body, I mean, you can eat it later on, you know, once a month or once a year. But now while we're healing your system, no, you can't eat it. Not right now. This thing here is a crime. This should be parent abuse. We ought to storm McDonald's and say, look, you guys are poisoning our population. So that's not healthy. And then you add this type of toxic assault, you know, 81 different vaccines by the time they're 6, multiple ear infections, so they have multiple courses of antibiotics. I mean, we're losing a generation there. Dave, I mean, 56-year-old guy, 30 pounds overweight, taking this many chemicals. Does anybody know what Tylenol with steroids with an antacid does to a human being? I don't. And he was funny because I told him, I said, look, Dave, take one of every drug you're taking. I know you're taking about 9, 10 drugs. Put it in a Petri dish, grind it up, and take it to the police department and say, somebody tried to slip me this last night. Okay, and tell them am I being poisoned or they're trying to help me? You know what he said? Doc, I'm not going to do that. They're going to say it's poisonous. I know, Dave. So 90 days later, he's drug-free. His body's functioning correctly. He's just better. It just makes sense. So when you boil it down, The thyroid is a clue to the function of the body, not how the body's working, okay? And that's the same thing with blood pressure. It's the same thing with depression. It's the same thing with joint pain. It's the same thing with everything. None of those are problems. They're clues to an alteration of physiology. Does that make sense? If you see bruises everywhere, what does that mean? It could mean excess stress. It could mean excess cortisol. It could mean, it just means something, for goodness sake. Okay, you don't ignore it. Okay, does that make sense? It does to me too. Now next week, Janine is talking about thyroid and hormones, but I got to tell you, did you learn a lot tonight? Yeah. I know, because after thyroid and hormones, we're going to talk more about thyroid. So we've got 2 more nights of thyroid. So thank you very much.